Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's coffee break session. Is ABM FOMO getting in the way of ABM success? My name is Stephanie Siemens, and I'm a Senior Digital Marketing Associate at Iron Horse. I'm so excited to introduce our two speakers we have today on this topic. The first being Uzair Dada, founder and CEO of Iron Horse. Next, we have today's guest speaker, John Miller, Chief Marketing Officer at Demandbase, one of the leading account-based marketing platforms on the market. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, wouldn't miss it.
John has an impressive resume and a rich background in all things B2B marketing. He was previously the CEO and founder of Engagio, and before that, the co-founder of Marketo. Now, before we jump in and I let these two take it away, I'd like to quickly announce that we are launching a survey report titled The State of Enterprise B2B Tech Marketing. This report is going to be launched on Monday. We're very excited about it. We surveyed nearly 400 senior marketing leaders in the US-based B2B tech organizations with a minimum of 100 million in revenue. We talked about and we asked them about their initiatives, their challenges, and marketing approaches related to their growth strategy. So keep an eye out for a link to the report via email, and you'll also be able to find it in our resource center on our website starting Monday. In this report, we learned a lot, but one thing that we heard loud and clear is that ABM is marketing. So we're going to talk about that in today's coffee break. In today's session, we'll use some of the data from the report as jumping off points, and we'll take a look at what marketers are really doing versus what they think they're doing with ABM. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Uzair and John.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Thanks for the intro. And John, always awesome to connect and chat and kind of learn from the best. And I'd say it's an honor to have you on here. And I think the attendees will enjoy a lot sort of this conversation and learning about where the world ABM is today, because you are definitely one of the founding fathers of ABM and have a lot of good to say about it and a lot of things to say about it. So I'm excited. So thank you.
Yeah, again, the respect is mutual and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. So, one of the things that Stephanie alluded to when we did the survey is we've been on this ABM train for a while. And it started with sort of a concept, interesting, people started piloting certain things, then it became sort of a campaign idea, and now it's sort of become mainstream. So when we surveyed in our survey, we found out, I think the number was somewhere in the high 70% of the people have established ABM programs. So it's synonymous with If anyone's doing B2B enterprise marketing, they have an ABM program and strategy in place. But when you sort of unpeel and unravel what's underneath it, you sort of find a lot of interesting scenarios. One, it's fairly immature still in a lot of organizations. They're still calling things ABM where all they're doing is sort of account-centric email marketing, or they're doing programmatic to people who are in their Marketo or Eloqua databases. Sort of there. So I want to just start out because you sort of have a lot of things to say around this category, both in just kind of your previous background of where you came from and being a founder of Engagio and Marketo, and now at Demandbase, which is a premier platform in this category. What do you think for enterprises who are trying to do it right, what does it take to be successful? What does a good, successful ABM program look like or strategy look like?
Yeah, I mean, a couple thoughts I'd love to share on this, right? The first, as you implied, is, ABM is not a campaign or a tactic.
Yeah.
It's a way of running your go-to-market. But I think where one of the misconceptions fall in is people tend to think that it's sort of a black and white. You're either doing ABM or you're doing demand gen. It's either account-based or lead-based. And I actually think a better way to think about it is more of a spectrum of styles where you might have true bespoke one-to-one ABM for your most strategic 7 and 8, 9-figure deals, or slightly more scalable one-to-few style for your high 6, low 7-figure deals, a one-to-many style for your 6-figure deals. Down to even what I call targeted demand gen, right? Which is kind of like what you talked about. We're like, yeah, I'm running a webinar or an email campaign, but I'm focusing on specific accounts. And it continues down to kind of inbound marketing, even PLG. And so, I think some companies, the deal sizes they sell fit into a very narrow band. and they may only practice one style on that spectrum.
Mhm.
But I think most companies, like demand-based, for example, we sell deals ranging from 25K to, 4 or 5 million, right? So we're going to be practicing a more than one style along that spectrum.
Right.
And as you embrace that mindset, it becomes less, I'm doing ABM,
Yeah.
and more, I'm just doing the right kind of go-to-market for the deals I have,
Yeah.
which often means focusing on a set of accounts.
Yeah.
So that's the first
Yeah.
tip I have is like, don't think about this black and white. And then the second, where I think people need to sort of really embrace, success, and maybe people don't spend enough time up front, is on what I call the account intelligence aspect. There's so much, you can do all the marketing you want and campaigns or whatever, but if you're not sitting on a foundation of really understanding the accounts, both which ones you want to go after, but more importantly, what's going to be the most relevant and resonant to the accounts and the people at those accounts, you're bound to be less effective. And so, I really preach for my team and for our customers, that you want everything to be sitting on a good foundation of account intelligence, which to me is both covering a good view of the first party data that you have about those accounts, because there's so much good stuff that ends up getting locked in just Marketo or just your Outlook server, and how you really bring all that together, and then augment it with quality third-party additional data, whether that's intent or technographics or just hierarchies, and good clean data. So that investment in account intelligence, I think, is key.
Another interesting survey result that came out was around use of intent data was spiked ridiculously high.
Yeah.
And what was more surprising was that almost high 40% of people were using 2 or more intent data sources. So the whole layered intent model was taking in place, which is awesome, right? And there were, I think, 15 or so percent, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere there in the teens, were using 4 or more intent data sources.
I totally believe it.
Right. And so sort of kind of what's your take on sort of like, layered intent and how people should be thinking about that?
Yeah. So, well, I think first, whenever we talk about intent, I'm always struck by the stat I heard from Gartner.
Yeah.
Which is that 67% of companies say that their biggest challenge with intent is, kind of understanding how to use it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
that's the operationalization, of all this stuff
100%
is critical. But I'm not surprised by the layering of multiple vendors, because when you think about it, I mean, if we go back just half step, where does intent data come from, right? It starts with there's a person on a page. And what an intent vendor will do is first, they're going to figure out what company that person works at.
Right.
And then they're going to do some natural language processing on the content of that page to figure out the topic.
Yep.
And then you're going to start looking for patterns and trends.
Right.
The reality is almost every intent data provider is running that same methodology, but on different websites, different input data. So like at Demandbase, we're doing ours by looking at the B2B bid stream. So what are people reading on the New York Times and CNN and things like that? Whereas G2 is doing it off of their own website. And Bombora is doing it off of the Madison Logic Network. And so, really, you're going to get different signals because you're mining the intent off of different input sources.
Yeah. So
I always tell people more intent is better. If you can afford it, it's like having more leads. Why wouldn't you want more signal?
Exactly.
But I would focus first on making sure you can operationalize it before you started layering on more, because otherwise you're just layering on more and more less useful stuff.
I totally agree. So let's come back to operationalization. So you talked about sort of what people should be doing. Can you share maybe 1 or 2 good examples of who you think is doing it right?
Yeah.
What is it that they're doing right?
Yeah. So, I'm an advisor to a company called Matillion, which is in sort of the cloud ETL space.
Yep.
And I think what they've done really well is kind of two things. First, they've taken their account intelligence and used it to tier their accounts into 4 levels. Very much like the spectrum that we were sort of talking about before.
Yep.
And they've defined entitlements for each of those tiers. So, literally they've written down, if an account is in tier 1, marketing is going to do this and sales is going to do this. If they're in tier 3, et cetera, et cetera. And that ends up literally being the contract, between the marketing and the sales team, about literally, if we agree this account is like this is what's going to happen. And it also gives them the constraints. Because they've written down the entitlements, they know they can only handle, I forget the number, but let's just say so many tier 1s. And that forces them not to pick too many in that account. Then the other thing they've done is a nice job of mapping out the account journey, like the stages that they want to track where an account might be, ranging from, a qualified account that they might be interested in, but is totally cold, like not even aware of the category, down to maybe they're showing awareness for the category, but not for Matillion, to engagement, to kind of hot accounts, to opportunities and beyond. And then they adjust their messaging, the tactics they're using to be appropriate for where that account is. Like if an account is somebody you're interested in going after, but is otherwise totally cold, you need to focus on brand.
Yeah.
That's aware, and that's really an emotional play
Right.
more than anything else.
Right.
Whereas, okay, they're starting to show some engagement. You still don't want your salespeople knocking on their door.
Yes.
But you want to move from emotion to logic and start bringing your thought leadership and things like that to the table.
Yep.
And then if they're actually hot, like the algorithm says, hey, they look like your other accounts looked when they were starting to enter the opportunity stage. Now you want to kind of, make sure that you're focusing your sales team and your SDRs, on that effort. So it's really kind of at each step, being thoughtful about, if it's a tier 1 at this stage, we do this, and then just putting all that into practice. So cool. They've done a really good job with that. And similar, and if I may say, I think we've done similar at Demandbase too. Yeah. In terms of kind of aligning all that. The other thing that we've done, I think, nicely at Demandbase, in addition to tiers and journeys, is really made sure that we are orchestrating those messages across different channels and touch points. So when we see an account, a tier 2 account, in the what we call MQA, or marketing qualified account stage, right? We're gonna use our own product to change the ads they see on display. We're also going to push that into LinkedIn, so LinkedIn sees different ads, and push into outreach, so our sequences are going to change, and into Marketo, so our nurture tracks and our email campaigns change. And we've put a lot of time and energy into setting all that up, so now it's totally automated. And that kind of intelligent account journey keeps everything orchestrated. So
that's awesome.
So those are some of the best practices.
So
use account intelligence to tier the accounts, understand the journey stages, and then orchestrate kind of across channels.
So let's touch on 3 things that were interesting that as you were talking through this. One was the contract between marketing and sales. I think that's a really interesting point. When people, I think one of the disservice that name ABM has done is put the M in the ABM, right? Yep, totally. And so everyone thinks this is a marketing campaign. And to me, ABM is not a marketing campaign or a sales campaign, it's a growth strategy. And so if you're thinking this is a marketing campaign, you've lost it already.
Yep.
And so you sort of need to have that alignment issue. And I think one of the things I've seen a lot is people give lip service to alignment. It's like, yeah, we want to do this, is great. Maybe CMO CR talks is great, but it doesn't stick. And I love the enterprise approach of rolling things out. Yeah, we did a couple of Zoom sessions, or we did a little half-hour workshop training day, and yep, oh, it didn't work. I tried it, and they're not there. My best example was someone's like, yeah, this person is no longer at the company, or this is not the person that I should be talking to. I'm like, guys, you have insight you didn't have yesterday. Back to your operationalization. How are you operationalizing it? So any sort of insights for our attendees today in terms of driving sustained sales and marketing alignment? I think the idea of the contract, I think, is a really cool one.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things. One, as you mentioned, the name is wrong.
Yeah,
we don't call it ABM, we call it ABX.
Yeah,
it's account-based experience.
Yeah,
and it is literally about using intelligence to give the right experience to each account, kind of at each stage.
Yeah,
and that name is the bigger umbrella.
Yeah,
kind of brings other people in. I think 2, the contracts, the entitlements are really important. 3, I think the more you can let the sales team pick the accounts, the more they're going to feel ownership of the process.
Yeah.
So I say make that marketing driven, but sales owned.
Yeah.
Marketing can give the data. Hey, here's all the accounts, and here's their scores, and but now you get to go pick 5 tier 1s and 10 tier 2s, or et cetera.
Right.
And then the other best practice that, I've used, companies like Snowflake, even Salesforce uses this to really drive alignment, is what we call the ABX stand-up. And it's really simple and it's amazingly effective. It's literally, let's just say every 2 weeks, have a meeting that doesn't get blown off with the AE, the SDR who supports that AE, if you have one, and a marketer. Don't have any manager. There's no managers in that meeting because it's not a pipeline report or a status or anything like that. But the topic is, pick some number of accounts in that rep's territory. What's going on, and what are we going to do to further our goals to help those accounts move down the journey? It can be a 15-minute meeting. It's a stand-up. And yet it does, so many ideas come out of it, and so much alignment occurs because sales and marketing are talking about the accounts.
100%. Yeah, we've done something similar where we call it sort of concierge services, and you sort of almost kind of marketing becomes that enabler to drive those conversations, including putting in, digital gifting stuff or other things to enable that thinking process together. And I totally agree. I think companies don't do enough to riff off each other. We run in stovepipes and silos. We don't talk to each other more. Our talking is passing leads over, but we don't really share ideas about, because there's collectively really awesome marketing and sales ideas on both sides, and we don't do enough of that.
Yep.
So I think that's cool.
I'm not a big sports fan myself, but I love using sports analogies.
Yeah.
So we don't want is the baton handoff analogy.
Yeah.
I think a better analogy for ABX is a U.S. soccer team, an American soccer team, or no, sorry, I'll use football, where you've got your different players in different positions, right? You have your linemen and your quarterback and your wide receivers, and they each have a role to play, but they're on one team.
Yeah,
they work together as they move the ball up and down the field, and that's similar for marketing and sales. You have different roles to play, but you're working as a single team, and it's the key and the reason I switched to American football is because it works best when there's a playbook.
Yeah.
And I think back to your concierge service, I think marketing can and should be the owner of the playbook and come say, like, here are the plays we can run, things we can do.
Yeah.
But then leave it up to the sales rep to be the quarterback.
100%.
And say, all right, we're going to run this play right now.
Game time decision.
And then you execute.
Totally. The other thing you touched on the demand-based example, which I'm a huge fan of, is, the concept to me should be, how do I deliver unified account conversations when I'm doing this, right? So you talk about experiences, which is, my prospects are everywhere. In today's digital age, there's, on average 25 to 27 touch points. Majority of them are happening off domain. And so how do I enable a conversation where one action in one channel informs another action in another channel?
Yeah.
And this also touches on the operationalization of intent, how people act, yada, yada. you guys you touched on, hey, we have stuff we're doing. We're taking our first party, third party data, doing that programmatically, kind of pulling people across stages, but we're also enabling the retargeting LinkedIn. We're using Marketo, we're using social, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome concept, hard to do.
Yeah.
And operationalize. So even, and I challenge you saying, you guys have automated a lot of stuff. Yeah, you can automate some, there's still a decent amount of elbow grease required to make it real. So
a lot of work.
How are you doing it? Yeah. So how are you doing it? How are you enabling that? And are there tips and ideas and guidance around what should people embark on? Because what I've seen really is they start on email, perhaps they layer in programmatic, but majority of the people are that's it.
So a couple thoughts, first, your biggest barrier is to be organizational silos.
Yeah.
100%. You've got your team that runs digital, your team that runs email, and your team that runs the website. And especially in a larger enterprise, those teams don't even necessarily talk to each other. So there is just organizational work to get these silos broken down.
Yep.
Let's say you can get the silos talking, right? And now you're sort of ready to start doing real cross-channel orchestration. I don't want to push, as a technology vendor, I'm always sensitive to pushing technology too much, but a lot of people say you don't always need technology to do ABM, but you do need technology to really do this kind of cross-channel orchestration.
No doubt. Yeah.
And not everybody owns that kind of technology. But then in terms of the elbow grease, the work to actually get it done, ultimately, I think what you want to be thinking about, if you have a foundation of account tiers and journey stages, that tends to be kind of the start, because you sort of said, okay, we're going to want to treat the account like this. And now you're ready to sort of take those audiences, right? Look, each intersection of that cell is an audience, and then just set up the syncing of those audiences into the different platforms. Now, I don't want to make it sound like you've got to have a team of 5 spending a year doing all this. Like anything, it works. It's always a good idea to think big, start small, and move quickly. So you could start with just 1 or 2 tiers and 1 stage. Okay, only for my hot MQA accounts in tiers 2 and 3. Let's start orchestrating and syncing audiences, and then you can kind of build from there. I will say though, we've had so much success at Demandbase with this. There's a metric that we track called lift, which is basically we look at the baseline of engagement we had from the account before we started, and then we look after, and lift is how much more engagement are we getting kind of after. A benchmark that we quote our customers is you should expect about a 25% lift, and that's a little conservative because we want people to sort of feel like they can beat the benchmark, but we're seeing 60 to 80% lift depending on the journey stage.
So this is a perfect segue in sort of the last question for our conversation. And my favorite one is metrics and ROI, right? Even to this date, even though we believe we're all smarter, we still question marketing contribution and to sales and the MQL, MQA debate, or hey, how do I know this really lift was really because of what you are doing, right? And did this really drive the engagement? So what should the CMOs and CROs and the sales teams and the marketing teams be looking at? Should they be different metrics? Should they be the common metrics?
Yeah.
And how should they be thinking about that?
Yeah. Well, one of the, I'm going to get my soapbox for a second.
Yeah.
I've been on a campaign recently preaching against the concept of marketing sourced and sales sourced pipeline.
Right.
Back to my football analogy, right? When you score a goal, nobody says, well, great, the wide receiver scored the goal. Right. We scored the goal.
Yeah.
And ultimately at the end of the day, all we really care about is, did we score enough?
Goal.
Yeah. And so I really do encourage, us to, change our metrics in terms of if we're, as we move into this, ABX world, orchestrated world, that, really kind of throw away the individual team sourced, metrics and goals, and look at the total. Now, that doesn't mean you can't still measure that, right? Just like at the end of the day, you measure who, how many, touchdowns you scored by running or passing, and who caught them and who threw them. You have that data because it helps you improve your team.
Right.
That's not what you ultimately care about or measure or report to the board.
Yeah.
So, end soapbox. But that's definitely kind of a campaign I'm on to push, and very few companies are there today, to be honest.
100% agree with that. So in the absence of the companies that are not there, and it is a soapbox still, and I agree, like, that's why I said it's, ABM or ABX is not a sales strategy, marketing strategy, it's a growth strategy, exactly for that reason. If you're still thinking about you versus me, you've lost already, right?
Exactly.
So, and you're seeing some interesting stuff. In some organizations, the CMO is reporting the CRO.
Not a fan of that, but I hear you.
But it's an interesting approach, right? You're saying alignment. Everyone's aligned to sort of one sort of focus area, which is kind of an interesting idea of alignment that some organizations are sort of thinking about. But from a metrics perspective, what do you think people should be looking at?
Yeah. So working backwards from a total pipeline goal.
Yeah.
I still think waterfall journey funnel metrics are sort of the most important ones you can look at.
Yeah.
So, you should have a model that tells you if you need this much pipeline, how many opportunities do you need? How many meetings do you need for that? How many MQAs do you need for that? And how many campaign responses do you need for that? I mean, and, over time, you'll refine that model, and you'll understand it's different for your enterprise segment versus your mid-market segment. And you'll understand that other factors, you can refine that model over time. But once you kind of have it in place, you're ready to sort of both set goals all the way up the funnel for how many MQAs you need and how many campaign responses you need, as well as conversion rates.
Yep.
And those conversion rates start telling you where there's opportunity for improvement.
Right.
And marketers, we've been doing that for years in demand gen, right? Ever since the Serious Decisions waterfall.
Yep.
I think what needs to happen, and companies are starting to do, is to evolve I'm a fan of the double funnel.
Yeah.
Where you have both a traditional lead-based journey as well as an account-based journey that usually comes together at the opportunity stage, and have goals and metrics, across both those pieces.
That makes sense. Well, this has been awesome. Really, really appreciate all the interesting insights and conversations. Always a joy to sort of connect and chat about this and learn things. And hopefully our audience took some good stuff away from it. So appreciate, John, for all your hard work in this area and thoughts, and appreciate you giving us the time today.
Well, appreciate you having me. And, quick pitch, everybody make sure you check out the survey when it gets sent to you. It's good stuff.
Appreciate it. Thanks all.